Rubio.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary, for being here today. We had a chance to briefly talk about this. I wanted to explore it further with you. So there's a program that China's undertaken. It's called Made in China 2025. The plan is to dominate the 10 biggest technologies of the future. One of those 10 is the pharmaceutical industry, in particular biopharma. In fact, it was the second largest investment in China last year. And the way they do it is twofold. One is they block off their own market to foreign competition, and they do this in other industries. They're doing it now with biopharma. But the other is, frankly, they just steal intellectual property. And they do that through a number of methods. The foreign domestic partnerships they require. If you go do, as a pharmaceutical industry, you go do business in China, you have to partner with one of their companies. They have a track record of stealing intellectual property. Obviously, if you're not paying for the research and are benefiting from it, that's an incredible, not just as an unfair and illegal, it's an incredible advantage. The other is they buy small companies, including here domestically, that have key research components of other industries. We should anticipate the same in pharmaceuticals. And the third, frankly, is just steal it. They break into a computer, through a cyber attack. They buy a business, or they go after the researchers. And that's the part that I'm most concerned about. As you know, we spend a lot of money and through NIH to fund biomedical research, and a lot of that is done through universities. And I'm concerned about that because universities are soft targets, and they're soft targets for two reasons. First, universities don't think this way. They operate in collaborative environments with other people, and they're not used to sort of an adversarial setup that this proposes. But the other is I wonder whether they have the systems set up to protect themselves for intellectual property theft. And that could be ranging from cyber all the way to actually being able to identify individuals and partners they're working with who ultimately are really just transferring intellectual property back to a Chinese company or the Chinese government to give them a competitive advantage. And I would just say that if their growth in this field and advances were being driven by better innovation, more investment, and all these sorts of things, then it would be on us to become more innovative and invest more. But when a significant part of their advances on technology in general, and biomedicine in particular, is driven by intellectual property theft, well, we've got deep concerns. And I also believe that this has significant national security implications for our country. I challenge people to think for a moment what the world would look like if the latest, greatest cures for diseases, including or potentially things like Alzheimer's that are going to have a very significant impact on our budgets for years to come, were controlled by China, the amount of leverage that would provide them geopolitically and the like. So I was curious whether anyone at the agency is thinking about this, thinking about how to protect our research, knowing that this industry is a target of a nation with a long track record of stealing intellectual property.
Senator, thank you very much for raising and highlighting what is a very important issue. It is one that is on our radar. It is one we're working on. I'd be happy to work with you offline also in appropriate settings to discuss this. But I think you have hit on a really quite important issue.
All right. The second question is more local, and it has to do with preparedness. During the 2017 hurricane season, my office at one point became in many ways a triage center, largely centered on getting federal agencies to communicate with each other and states. This was particularly problematic in Puerto Rico, where there were delays in getting supplies and HHS medical teams to the island. And I want to say there were multiple occasions in which FEMA or the Department of Defense caused delays in being able to get HHS supplies to Puerto Rico. FEMA took days to approve flights for HHS medical teams and some medical supplies. They took a week to respond. The DOD took a week to respond to the initial request for medical teams to Puerto Rico. Have we learned any lessons from Puerto Rico, from the hurricanes in 2017? Because I think this has applicability, not just we're entering hurricane season now, but I think this has applicability for, natural disasters in the future, or quite frankly, biological attacks or any other sort of mass public health threat we might face.
No, again, thank you for raising what is an issue very much on my radar. We actually just had a session with DOD and other interagency partners on lessons learned from the last season preparing for this, with a focus in particular on transportation resources and our ability to deploy, because of course we're often dependent on others for transport. And so there is a major focus on lessons learned from the unprecedented cycle of hurricanes that really taxed, of course, our system. And I'm hopeful that we have systems worked out better and connectivity even better to make sure we serve our people well.